And there are some healthy recipes. Well, there are a few healthy. There are a couple of healthy recipes. But here's the deal. I think everything in moderation,
Hey everyone, I'm Megan Kernan, 5 on Your Side reporter. We're here at the St. Louis County Library where today's show icon Al Roker is in town to talk food, family, and flavor. He's signing copies of his cookbook and sharing the stories behind his favorite recipes. I had the chance to sit down with him, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Here's our full interview.
So Al Roker's Recipes to Live By was actually my daughter Courtney, who's a professional chef. It was her brainchild. She said, "Hey, Dad, we should do a cookbook together because you do a lot of cooking." And I said, "No, I don't want to. I did one about 30 years ago, and it's a lot of work." And then I said, "And you don't have kids, so your kids just keep going at you." Me. Finally, I said, "Okay, here's the deal. We'll do a cookbook, but you're going to have to write it. You're the chef. You're going to have to do the recipes. I'll write the head notes and do all that stuff." And the way it developed was we decided to do something where my mother didn't write down any recipes, my grandmothers didn't, and so Courtney reverse engineered all these recipes. She talked to my siblings and friends, and she came up with recipes that we grew up with. And then we widened it out to other family and friends, and so we've got 100 recipes of that means something to either us or to our dearest friends and family, and so it really is a labor of love.
Okay, amazing. So family cookbook, out of 100. Loaded question, but what would be your favorite recipe?
And that's not, I think there are two of my mother's recipes. One is the oxtail stew with dumplings, which is probably one of the more involved recipes, but it's worth it. Most of the recipes are pretty quick, only a few ingredients. This one takes some, but it's worth it. And the other is her dessert, pineapple upside down cake, which very old school, but is making a comeback. You're seeing it on restaurant dessert menus a lot now. So those are probably my two faves.
Okay. And so I would say I can cook pretty well. Mm-hmm. If it's an easy recipe, you said most of them are pretty quick.
Yeah.
What would you say the easiest one for somebody like me? What would you suggest?
It would be hard to narrow them down because they really are pretty, because I don't like a lot of fuss. I don't like a lot of sauces, and most of these recipes are either roasted, grilled, pan seared. There's not not a lot of ingredients. So I think almost everything in there is pretty good. One of my other faves is my wife Deborah Roberts. Her mother's potato salad. These are all pretty much, there's nothing very exotic in this. They're all staples. They're all things that I think people grew up with. I think it's kind of comfort food. And there are some healthy recipes. Well, there are a few healthy. There are a couple of healthy recipes. But here's the deal. I think everything in moderation. These are not recipes. Like a lot of these recipes, you don't want to have every day, but why not indulge, or you're having somebody over, or you want to impress somebody. I think this is the way to go.
Sounds like my kind of cookbook. So you've done everything from weather to writing. What was harder, covering a hurricane or finishing this book on deadline?
I would say covering a hurricane, because my daughter Courtney really was a stickler. She's a recipe developer besides being a professional chef. So I really had the easy part. I just had to write the head note to each recipe, and those are only a paragraph or two, and it was why the recipe means something to us. So, or to whoever I know who contributed. Covering a hurricane is serious work, because it's, first of all, it's somewhat dangerous. We don't take any undue risks, but you still have to worry about that. And you're talking about people's lives and their livelihoods, and so it's not just entertainment. It is vital information that I think, makes a difference in people's lives. And with climate change, and we're seeing these rapidly intensifying hurricanes, not only do people who live along the coast have to worry about them, but even here in Missouri, remnants, as we've seen, can do as much, if not more, damage than when the hurricane makes landfall, along the coast. So at this point, I think everybody's got to be concerned about the effects of climate change and what it means to our systems, our weather systems we're dealing with, especially even what used to be routine rainstorms, as you know, will now overproduced by 20-30% more rain because the atmosphere is so warm, it can hold so much more moisture, and these storm systems can really wreak havoc.
Right. You mentioned you've been to St. Louis before.
Yeah.
How many times have you been here?
Oh gosh, I can't even begin to count the number of times I've been here. I was here I've been through a number of times when I've had different books published. I've covered stories here at least 20 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite things to do whenever you are here?
My favorite thing to do is, I think especially downtown St. Louis is a great walking city. I love to walk. And there's just something special about walking along the river. And listen, you can see pictures of the arch, but nothing does it justice as seeing it in person. I've been to the top of the courthouse, the old courthouse, where the Dred Scott decision came, and went up into the cupola and stood outside. So I've gotten to get a really great view of St. Louis, and every time I come, I'm always impressed. But the best part about St. Louis really are the people. Everybody is. In fact, it's funny. I've been in Missouri now twice in 2 weeks. I was here last weekend in Kansas City for the Big Slick, the fundraiser they hold to support Children's Mercy Hospital.
Awesome.
And now here I am in St. Louis.
All right. Well, we love to have you here.
Mo, Missouri. Mo.
So when did you realize you wanted to become a meteorologist?
Well, I didn't want to. First of all, I'm not a meteorologist. I don't have a degree in meteorology. I don't call myself a meteorologist. I had no plans of being on television. My department chairman, I went to a school in upstate New York, State College, SUNY Oswego, and I was majoring in radio and TV. That's how old I am. Now it's called communications. It was radio TV because that's all we had. And I did my first TV performance class, and my professor said, Roker, you've got the perfect face for radio. But he actually put me up for my first job at his television station in Syracuse doing weather. And I just by sheer happenstance, I had taken a class in back then it was called ecology, and I took a class, an intro to meteorology, just for a science requirement. I had no intentions of being on TV, let alone a TV weather person. And my department chairman put me up for the weekend weather job. They were starting a weekend newscast in the mid-1970s, and I got the job, and the rest is infamous history.
Wow, that's awesome. What would you say to our younger generation considering a career in news or journalism?
I would say, and I think it holds true not just for journalism, but for anybody, is to be curious, to try to have as wide and as varied an educational experience as possible, not to shut yourself off to other experiences, because you never know what you're going to do. My wife, who's an Emmy and Peabody award-winning journalist, went to the University of Georgia as a theater major and took a journalism class, and boom, she was hooked. So, and also know your sources, trust your sources. If you only go by what's on the internet, especially now with AI, what do we know is true? What is truth? Right now I've got, I've had people come up to me asking about this blood pressure or heart medication that I'm endorsing. I haven't endorsed it, but there are AI generated videos of me talking about how I've had 2 heart attacks and all this stuff and stents put in and now I'm healthy. If I didn't know me and you're just looking at these casually, yeah, you'd say, yeah. I've had friends come up to me and say, my mother bought this stuff for you. Or is this really? No, it's not me. So there, you can't even really, the saying used to be seeing is believing. That's not true anymore. It's not true. So, you've got to not even trust, and the saying goes, trust but verify. Now it's just verify before you trust. Because we are entering into uncharted territory at this point. There's misinformation, and then there's just flat out lies that are being perpetrated for either for nefarious reasons or for money, and it's tough. I don't know. That's why I think folks like you, folks like the journalists at Channel 5, that makes a difference. Because they know you, they trust you, but a lot of people see stuff on the internet and think, oh, I saw it on the internet. Well, not so much.
Right. Couldn't have said it better. Last question for you. How does a journalist like me advance in my career to one day work on a show like The Today Show?
Well, here's the deal. I don't think... People have said to me, oh, The Today Show, this must be your dream job. No, because it never dawned on me that I'd be on The Today Show. I was so happy. I grew up in New York City, and when I got my job doing weekend weather at WNBC in New York, the NBC station, I thought, this is it. This is great. My parents can turn on the TV. They can see me. I've made it. Maybe down the road, the Monday through Friday guy will step back and maybe I'll get the 6 or the 10 or whatever. So I guess it's the long way around of saying, just be you. Just be the best you, and everything else will fall in place if it's going to, And that's, listen, it's one of those things where I think you don't know what's going to happen. The only thing you can do is be prepared for when the opportunity comes along. And if you are the best you can be, and the other thing I tell everybody is you gotta be open to continue to learn. Listen, I'll go, whether it's here in St. Louis or I'm at another city, and I'm watching I always watch the local stations, and I see things where local weather folks are doing something really interesting. I thought, oh, maybe I can use that. Maybe I can do that. If you think you're done, then you're done. If you think you've got it figured out, you don't. That's the trick. You've always, there's that saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, if the old dog wants to keep in the game, he'll learn new tricks.
That's great advice. Thank you so much,
My
Al.
pleasure, Megan.
Appreciate your time.
You bet.